You're not going to count it down for me? All right. Today, welcome everyone. Today is a day. It's Tuesday, February 11th, 2025, 7:03 p.m. Lonnie, can you call the roll, please?
Sure. Kurt Johnson.
Here.
Ross-Driven is absent. Burns.
Here.
Spurlock is absent. Moore.
Here.
Here. Carnes.
Here.
Meeting called to order, 7:03 p.m.
All right, thank you. We're going to start out with public comment. Thank you to our commenter for coming out tonight. You may know this already. You have 5 minutes to give your comments. And if you're finishing a thought at 5 minutes, feel free to finish your thought. And please say your name, and if you've written anything, you can give it to Lanya, but it looks like.
Thank you. No. Thank you. My name is Megan Carter. I'm a parent of a Longfellow kindergartner and Longfellow second grader. I just have 4 things I want to touch on. The first one is I just want to express my strong support for our teachers and hope that they can receive a strong and fair contract, as well as school professionals. We love Mr. Neighbor and Mrs. Tatro and Ms. Patino and everybody at Longfellow, but those are the 3 folks that most are happily impacting our family life. Second, I want to urge the board to put forth stronger communication supporting undocumented children and families that are mixed immigration status. I'd like to see strong communication. I'd like to see direct communication to frontline staff. I'd like to see information handed out to students, like know your rights cards that they can give to their loved ones. I'd really love to see us taking a stronger lead in protecting undocumented and mixed status families and children. Third, I'd really like us to start thinking about protecting in advance our trans and gender nonconforming kids and families. I think we know we have an administration that has certain targets out. We love our trans and gender nonconforming kids and families, and we need to think proactively about what we can do to ensure that we are not setting ourselves up for anything, any federal requests that could come our way. Just making sure that we are thinking in advance strategically about ways to ensure we're protecting trans and gender nonconforming kids and families, which leads me to number 4, the Raptor system. This is a system where folks have to scan their IDs to get into a school during the school day. I think it was a bad idea under a good administration, and it's now a terrible idea under this administration. We are creating a record that could be searched. We should not be creating such a record. Just as an example, Illinois is one of the good states that allows folks to put an X for their gender marker on a license. That's something the Trump administration does not like. Obviously the Secretary of State is hopefully preparing to counter things like this, but now because we are collecting copies of people's licenses, District 97 needs to be prepared for how we would respond to such a request. So if we're not creating that record, then we don't have to worry about producing that record under a hostile administration. It also is a big, big source of resources that could be better appropriated, better used. So yeah, those are my points. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, that takes us to agenda item 6, Superintendent Overview.
Yep, I'm going to move over here so that I can see. And Michael, we can just, I can just let you know when to advance. There's not a lot of slides here. But good to be here, and wanted to let you know on the next slide here that we have a photo of the week going on. So thanks to the family members, staff, and students who contributed to the photo of the week. So I want to encourage everyone and board members to also send in photos of the week. So on the next slide, you can see these we sent out in our weekly wrap up. And just taking a moment, it's just joyful to receive these photos. So we sent them out At the top there, we've got a bulletin board from students at Irving that are honoring Black excellence in education. So each morning spotlights a different educator at Irving, and staff are featured right outside there. You could, those of you that know Irving, you know exactly where that board is, right in the front hallway. And then we have our principal, and we caught a picture. The crossing guard was out sick, and so we kind of this idea that we all pitch in to make everything work in our district. There we have Longfellow teachers, Judy Friesen and Veronica Dabney. They're wearing matching shirts honoring famous Black figures, and so someone snapped a picture. I think that's actually a selfie. And then we have our second grade team at Hatch that is having like a team meeting around multi-tiered systems of support and really thinking about what are the numbers telling us and what are we going to do in terms of instruction in our classrooms. And then at the bottom there, we've got Lincoln students, including a student, Rio, who had a really great time at the 75th annual Lincoln Carnival on February 1st. So like we've been around for a while. So the PTO and really all of our PTOs, bringing that sense of cohesion to our schools, and amazing volunteers and amazing members of our community coming together, making our young people smile. And then we have here, in that corner, you may recognize that we've got members of our Village of Oak Park sustainability officers. So we have Lindsay Nuratka and also Nalini Johnson are there. And so they had a conversation with our students about some of the changes needed in our district. And Lindsay is also a parent of a student in our district. So it's all those great connections. And then at the top, that just smile with the thumbs up, is a Holmes kindergartner. And so James is kind of beaming because it's the 100th day of school. And so just a great picture of all the things. So we welcome, on the next slide, just really want to keep asking people to please send in your photos and photos of all the things happening in our schools and in our community around Black History Month. We did highlight things happening at our library and local events around Black history. So we would love when our families, take part in these opportunities to snap a picture about those connections. So on the next slide, it's actually about connections is a big important theme. So tonight we have two presentations on the agenda. The middle school redesign and an update on the master schedule redesign. And then we have a portrait of an Oak Park 8th grade graduate. So the first one is aligned to district transformation goal number 2, this idea that we design for all, thinking differently about how instruction happens in our schools. And the fourth one is goal number 4, we learn everywhere, extending the reach of the school district to outside partners and organizations is what we're trying to do here with the portrait. So you'll see some of that tonight. And on the next slide, I just have 3 ideas. And this is the last slide I want to leave you with, but I want to ask that you consider and challenge us as you listen to tonight's 2 presentations, especially how there is really community collaboration and multiple fingerprints that are on the work before it comes to this table. So how are the middle school redesign, really making sure we're getting perspectives from students and staff and community members and really designing with a team so that what you see here isn't out of the minds of a few administrators. It's actually a participatory project, and one that we want, and that's something we want to see increasingly true of what we bring forward here. And same thing with our portrait work, has a lot of our community fingerprints on it, and we want to continue to grow that. We're also not doing things where we're just changing the color of the paint. We're actually making systems changes, and that's related to the second piece here. We're the third item there, changing how resources are used in the district. And resources include time, people, money, and technology. So how are we using our time? What's the purpose of it? And how are we using our resources so that we can actually achieve the big things that are outlined in our district's equity policy? So I want to challenge you to challenge us to be able to answer those kinds of questions because simply kind of talking about things or making performative gestures isn't actually gonna change the district in the way that we have said we want. If we want that, we're gonna have to make some courageous moves around how we use our resources. And so looking for you to, like I said, push us, engage us in those areas. So we're ready. Gavin?
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, middle school redesign, master schedule redesign.
Yeah, so we got the team coming up here. So Rawa, Anna, Luis, and April, and I think Nick was gonna be here, but he's here in spirit. Yes. Who wants the middle seat?
All right.
Luis doesn't bite, don't worry.
Thought we were gonna go in order. Now? I'm gonna be confused.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to share with us, with you our work so far. So this is an update about our master schedule redesign, and it's an honor to be with you tonight. So, we'll introduce ourselves, Lisa Leon,
April Computer. Rachel Cassell.
Anna Kinnaman.
right? And then, as Dr. Shah was mentioning, a lot of this work that is happening right now concentrates on that in our goal about designing for all, and especially in the area of redesigning our learning experiences. As we have discussed, a lot of the work that happens into this area is the opportunity to really take our policies and best practices, such as the equity policy that we have, and best practices, such in this case, the AMLI research that is behind it, about what middle schools, successful middle schools look like, and really bring that into consideration as we think about designing those learning experiences, that they are responsive, challenging, empowering, equitable, and engaging for all our students. As we think through that lens, we have engaged in these 5 buckets of work, as you have seen in previous presentations. And in this one specifically, we are looking into the schedule redesign process. So in this process, as we look into the work ahead, that we're doing, it's really about finding a way to bring those best practices and as well pairing them up with the student needs to make sure that we are responsive to these needs for our students. So we're very fortunate to have like a great team that represents all this work from diverse, not only like grade levels, programs, and really point of views, but also just to signal out, there has been a lot of people involved in this process. This is the people who are actually reviewing some of the feedback from our community members, from our students, from staff, and definitely we're looking forward as we continue this work to bringing this feedback along the way through our processes as we go into improving along the way as we continue reaching for that responsive schedule and responsive experiences for our students. So this has been a journey, started in October, and it's great to see those check marks happening right there. Right now we're that step in the process where we have identified like a tentative schedule structure that can provide support, and we still need to make sure that we check that schedule is meeting the needs of our students, and definitely as well that is fair and aligned to our goals, but also to the system as well as we're able to roll it out. So, all right.
Okay, so building a middle school schedule is very complex. I think those of us who are new to this learned that very quickly in this process. But this slide here shows some of the things that we determined were priorities based on some of the research from John Hattie about effect size. Anything that is above 0.4, he considers to be like medium or high impact. So if we look at like teacher collective efficacy, like that's a 1.57. So that's like having us on teams, where the kids are on core with, grade level teams. Response to intervention, so opportunities for intervention as well as enrichment opportunities for our students is another high one there. And then last is that advisory block for students to make those student-teacher relationships in their classes. So here are just kind of some of the things that we had to logistically think through as we were trying to create a schedule, knowing that, we have a fixed amount of time, we have fixed amount of space, and then trying to consider all of the classes a student has to take, mandates from the state in terms of things like PE and health, making sure kids have lunchtime, staffing accommodations, things like that. So these were all factors that went into the planning of creating a master schedule.
All right, so at the last time that we presented, January 14th, our team shared out the data collected from students, staff, and families. And on this slide, you can see the patterns we heard across each of those groups and what emerged as components that really matter to our community. We won't go over all the info again, so this is included in this slide deck as an appendix to this presentation for whoever would like to review it. But one thing we'd really like to highlight is while we heard all of these themes and we kept them in mind throughout the process as we were building our schedule, that it's really hard to put all of these things into a schedule. There are constraints and competing priorities, which means while we'd like to do everything, we simply are not able to do everything. So I think that's something to consider as we're presenting possible schedules. And then we just kind of want to look at refining the vision and developing options and finalizing our schedule. So the last couple of meetings, I'll kind of walk you through what our process was. We got into teams of 3, and we were able to, in those teams of 3, build our ideal schedule using the constraints of like our time and what we thought. It was kind of open to us, like whatever that team of 3 decided was going to be really important. And so, we all got together and then we shared each of our ideal schedules. And as Anna pointed out very quickly, it was like, hey, what happened to PE? It's not on the schedule, or wait, I thought we were gonna make lunch longer. It's like, no, we couldn't because, so it really gave us an opportunity to dig into like how difficult the work is. But all of those things got put back together, went back to the admin team, and then the next time we met, we were able to look at 3 possible viable schedules that might work within all those constraints. And so once the team, we got back into teams again, not teams of 3, I would say maybe like 6 or 7 to 8 people in each of those teams, and our opportunity to sit there and really analyze and go through the possible schedule. So some of the guiding questions in our analysis were things like, what do we need further clarification on with this schedule? What do we not understand about what was presented with the schedule? And then the other part was like, what do we love about the schedule? What do we hate about the schedule? What are possible roadblocks to this schedule that we could address and kind of refine before we have to implement it? And then we regrouped all together again, and we worked through those questions. April and Nick and Dr. De Leon just kind of like going through each of the things that all the teams brought up about each of the 3 possible schedules. And after we did that analysis, then we had an opportunity as an individual to rank the schedules and choose your first, second, and third. That's where we are in the process.
Rawa, I wonder before you go on, I think just what you've described in terms of that process, I think about like the kinds of instruction we hope to have in our classrooms and like the kind of engagement, it sounds like, and I know I've talked to, Luis too, but it would be helpful to hear from you, like what connections do you see as your experience as a learner in that situation? And like what kind of instruction we want in our classrooms? Like do you see parallels there that would be important to
I mean, definitely. I think it was important for the team to have an opportunity to build that schedule, or at least attempt to build a schedule, because I think we all have what we would ideally want. And once you start putting in all the pieces beyond what you want, but what has to be there, I think it was very like Anna said, it was very quickly that we were like, oh my God, like this is a lot more complicated than we anticipated it to be. Or even things like, well, what about this? And we got to the point where even we were saying, okay, we're not gonna make everybody happy. You know, like we have to walk away with something that we think is going to have everyone's voice. But there's definitely going to be some people who are not happy with the schedule because it's impossible to make everyone happy.
Yeah, to that point, I think it probably would have been easier if the administration just came to us and said, okay, here's the schedule that works. But I think there would have been a lot of questions then, and so trying it and not necessarily being successful, now when I see a schedule, I can be like, okay, well, I understand the process and why I can't guarantee X, Y, and Z.
So one of the things that actually was very, from your side as administrators, you know, kind of like supporting the group, the work of these teams, was also very rewarding to see those nuggets of innovation throughout. I think at the end of the sessions, we were able to come together and really reflect on the session and each piece from everybody and say, these are really, really great ideas. So then kind of get our heads together and try to figure out how we can make them work. There's still a lot of work ahead of us, but definitely we think it's in the right direction. Definitely is an improvement, and it's something that collectively we can say that it was created, it's on here. It's a B97 product.
Yeah, I think that's really important what you just said. I just want to make sure that we're elevating that because it's oftentimes like, you know, somebody, what are great middle schools doing? Let's go see. But there is this different journey when it's authentically created by ourselves. And I saw the shared spreadsheet that all of the different teams that you described, Robert, then people gave feedback and looked at each other's schedules, and then like this process of vetting it out. Just wanting to hold up that kind of authentic engagement with each other and innovation and relevance of what we're doing is also just because we have those same choices that we can make in everything that we do. Like, is it going to be just something like you said, Anna, where somebody says, here's the schedule, here's why? Or are we actually going to like believe that if we do something together, we're actually going to come up with a better solution, you know? And it's just that also is a through line in how we do our work. So I want to just thank you all for that level of engagement.
Thank you.
I did. Did you do the last slide? You did. Okay. So now we're looking at our next steps. So in February through March, we're finalizing the schedule. Like was mentioned, the staff went through and ranked 3 of the schedules. And so now we have to look at and check in with our various instructional department areas and look at the viability of the different constraints of the schedule that we presented might impact those areas, those program areas. We need to work with PowerSchool, which is our information system that helps build the schedule, to make sure that it is a buildable thing that we've on paper sketched out. And then, of course, during this time, continue to provide updates to our board, and our staff, and our larger community. And then, from March through May, we're looking at how do we implement our schedule. So we will begin the process of sharing with families and students the different options for electives, making those elective selections, looking at how we might have to look at staff time and time resources during that new schedule. That's basically March through May. And then when we go into the summer, May through the summer, it's really about continuing to communicate with students and families, getting those schedules created, sharing schedules with our students and our families, and then welcoming our new incoming 6th grade, hopefully into our middle school program that will be in August, and have our welcome back nights and live the schedule.
That's a great title for the next slide. You should live the schedule.
Yeah, so as we can see, there's a lot of really components that happen to make that schedule a reality. You know, it's not only about the planning, the designing. It's also the implementation and making sure that we tune up along the way those components, making sure that if we encounter a barrier, that we find a way to troubleshoot those. We want to make sure that all our students are benefiting from this, and that's what I intend of really going into the instructional review, to make sure that we're meeting the needs of every student in any other programs that we have. So having said that, going into the year that follows, a lot of this work will be a continuing and ongoing cycle of improvement as we continue collecting feedback from our community, from our staff, students, and families. We're targeting like a mid-year next year to see how things are working, or maybe not, get the kind of feedback, and making sure that we are responsive to that, to make sure that we adjust along the way, and we are able to meet that responsive schedule that we are looking and aiming for. Along the way, that's one of the biggest pieces. We have built that collaboration, integration between our sites. I think even you can see it in the table, has been always that level setting across both middle schools. And definitely we want to continue that as we continue our work, that we maintain doing that we maintain that consistency. So there's not a difference in programming from one middle school to the next. The experience should be very similar. There's going to be uniqueness about that community, but it should not be the learning experience that different. And then with that, I also want to also signal that we are really want to continue learning and really taking that feedback from our community, from our teacher assistants, everybody who works here, also from everybody from our community, as we go through these cycles of improvement throughout. And with that, that's so far. And thank you for your time.
Questions?
I have a question. I saw on one of your slides you're talking about creating more parity between the the two middle schools in terms of, like, I forget how you phrased it.
Consistency across?
Yeah, so I'm curious if that's in reference to something like the African American history class that like Julian, like Brooks doesn't have. And then in conjunction with that, then, is there a need for capacity building that's going to need to happen? Because I know, like, I think Ashley Cannon is the only one that teaches that class, correct? Oh, no, there's other people, okay. And so I don't know if people have expertise, I'm assuming someone does, probably in Brooks, if there's that level of capacity building, and then kind of connected, sorry, these are all kind of connected, you can pick which one you want to answer. I was actually thinking about how much you've had to envision, so like we've had these specific requirements that were part of IB that we were tied to. And so with the re-envisioning of the schedule, there's also the re-envisioning of moving away from some of the requirements of IB. I'm curious like how that impacted kind of what your visioning was. So I guess I'm just trying to figure, I guess the overlying question is like, what is the capacity building you've had to do to kind of allow for some of this to occur, whether it's about creating parity or redesigning classes. I know you talked about some professional development and whatnot. Was that question clear? I know there was like a lot of rambling.
Yeah, I would just say that to talk to your first question, we have had African American Studies in 8th grade at Brooks. When we rolled it out, there was a small number of students that signed up for it. We ran it through our SOAR block, and we've done it through trimester 3, just like we've done some of our other programming during trimester 3. So it's a little bit different the way that Brooks and Julian looks at it this year, but the idea is as we're building a master schedule, there is greater parity on how it is structurally looking in each of the buildings, so it's clear where those things exist. And then in terms of the IB constraints and requirements, when we separated from IB, it did allow for us to think about electives a little bit differently. So that created some creative platforms or thinking about how, given our community feedback and our student feedback, on having more opportunities to do greater things, how can we think about using the finite time we have to enable that to happen?
Yeah, I love that, because I know like when both my kids were picking like their track from middle schools, it was really frustrating that they like could not choose art or had to only choose art. So I appreciate that, so thanks.
So Sheree, do you have a question?
I'm writing and I'm gonna send it later.
Like, top 3, how different is this gonna feel, this schedule going to feel for a rising 7th and 8th grader? Because the 6th graders won't know, right? But versus what they're experiencing this year. I don't want this to be a long question, so that's why I said top 3. If there's even 3, but it sounds like there's a lot.
I think we can talk about our priorities as we have identified from the community. There was very strong call about increasing the amount of core classes time, and also to open the access point for electives. So I think that's where we can concentrate a lot of our focus on. And definitely, as it was asked a few moments ago, we still need to continue our work after this to really develop and design how those times look better. We're not talking about taking away electives in any ways. We heard that really clear from the community, and we are going to maintain as much as possible those electives, but also we need to figure out about how many seats, I guess, we have, and how many opportunities we have spread out throughout. So I think that's some of the pieces about the design, about how is that going to play into the system as well, as we test it.
Okay.
I think I'll just add too that for our rising 7th graders who will be 8th graders next year, they would have experienced a slightly different schedule each year. And I feel like we took away the C day and the J day this year. And I don't think that it impacted anyone in any significant way. I think like the teachers had to learn their schedule, but the kids were just ready. Like it's whatever the schedule was, that's what we're doing. I don't know that there was a lot of conversation or apprehension about where's the C day, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't like that. It was like, this is your schedule, let's walk you through it, and it was done. So I feel like if we are in agreement about what is gonna be best for the students, I feel like they're gonna be just fine.
Are you suggesting that maybe the adults are the problem?
No, I did not suggest that at all.
That's what I heard.
What I was suggesting is that children are flexible and more valuable than the rest of us.
That's what I heard you say.
I will just say for the record, my son hated J days, so he was psyched when they went away. But also, like, thanks to you guys, like, this is a really cool process, I think, to the point you were making, like, building this collaborative spirit, I could see really paying off in a lot of different ways. And I like the idea of like, I think you do get lots of good ideas when you bring thoughtful people together. And when everybody's got to own the result, good, bad, otherwise, I think it also makes for a more productive conversation or effort. My question is, when do you think we'll get to see it?
Yeah, so we're looking about in March, like potentially having like this ready is coming around the corner.
Okay.
We just want to make sure that whatever we present to you has been vetted, because we don't want to present something that is in conflict with our programming or access for any student.
Yeah.
So internally, then you have a tentative preferred schedule, but they're still pressure testing it.
Yeah,
So
understood.
it sounds like by the time you come back in March, we're going to be on the road to implementation.
Correct.
Great. I'm not trying to rush the process,
No,
but I know, Pete, that's probably the question most people are wondering.
That's a fair
as they listen
question.
to this.
That's a fair question. We hear you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.
Thanks. And next we have a portrait of an 8th grade graduate update.
Yep, and so Dr. Ebony Lofton, Chief Learning Innovation Officer, is coming up. And I'm going to be joining her today. Amanda, who usually presents with Ebony, is here. You just don't see her. She is here in spirit. So. What's that? No, she's up there in the camera side. All right, so I'm gonna try to make sure I don't sure I don't let you down.
Oh.
I'll try to do my best, Amanda. Uh-huh. All right, so here we are. Excited to be here with Ebony on an update on the portrait and out-of-school learning time. Oh, I'm already letting you down. There we go. How about you? So this presentation falls in that fourth area of our goals. We learn everywhere. And in this area, we have two major goals. One is this one that we're presenting tonight, the portrait of an Oak Park 8th grade graduate. And then second, early childhood education. And so Ebony and Amanda were going to present tonight, but there are certainly Tawanda, Donna, and Anna also serve on this team, and lots of other people providing input and guidance as well. So these are the three sections of tonight's presentation. And so just to kind of, because it's been a while since we gave like a portrait update, to remind us that the idea here is this is our community's collective vision for by the time a student graduates 8th grade, what competencies, what should they be able to know and do across our community. Now, within our schools, we teach a whole lot of standards. We're charged to do that. The portrait is some highlighted standards in different areas based on what our community said were our priorities. So that's what we'll be digging into tonight. So this is an image of those different 8 different areas of development. And again, this has gone through different refinements. So it's the first time you're seeing it in this form. And we will continue to look at how we brand the portrait, but you can see that those 8 different elements. We had, again here, lots of teacher design and community input to get us to this point that we can feel like when we show this to you, it's not something that Ebony and Amanda and I put together on a whiteboard. It's actually coming forward through lots of people's thinking. So just to walk us through and remember where we were, we started with this community visioning, and we talked about here what the focus was of, remember we started with affinity groups to make sure that in our equity policy, it says things like inclusive engagement, but in order to actually make it happen, you have to do things differently, and we have done things differently. We engaged first very deliberately with affinity groups to say, hey, here's our thinking, give us your feedback. And then based on what we heard from the affinity groups, we made that first version that we went out with everyone. We didn't just kind of send it out and hope that we would hear from voices that we didn't hear from. So that was a very deliberate act in our design, a very deliberate placement of our resources of time to reflect our values as outlined in the equity policy. So, and no, that's okay. The second piece there at the bottom is, I think it's important, last time at the board meeting we had a conversation about what outcomes matter and what are we focused on. This is a competency-based portrait. It's not about getting a certain score. It's actually about achieving competency in these 8 different areas as measured by learning standards. So just want to point out that frame, and then Ebony's going to talk a little bit more about that in a bit. So then this school year, aligning the voices and the vision to learning standards. So now we have these ideas of like, these are the different areas of development that matter. How do we make them tangible and something we can see and potentially even measure? That's what's been going on this year, is moving to that standards aligned portrait. And then we're really excited to share out with you in a little bit about how the portrait is also becoming a frame, as we've talked about before, for like how we think about development of young people in our community. And so you'll be seeing those portrait icons as we partner with the Park District or partner with the Oak Park Education Foundation. So we're excited about that becoming a shared language around youth development in our community. So it's not just about D97, it's about all of us coming together to raise our kids. And then finally, we've got some innovation incubator work that we're going to talk about in a little bit. So
I am. So what we've been up to this year so far is really just thinking about, first of all, how to make sure that we're centering student voice, so we'll talk about that in a bit, and also this big idea that Dr. Shaw alluded to in terms of making sure that our vision actually lives in competencies, which for us would be our learning standards. So the first thing is, new this year, we have an amazing new teacher leader role. These are our Portrait Early Learning Engagement teacher leaders. And I won't read the role description to you, but the goal was for them to really kind of think about what those out-of-school portrait aligned experiences could be that we would design for students, how to make sure that the portrait just lives in the community, thinking about professional learning and also continuing to engage the community around just the portrait and what we believe it could be and the potential it has. So as we were having these conversations, and it is a great joy to meet with this wonderful group of teachers every month, an idea formed in terms of just thinking about how we can bring that student voice into how we think about the portrait. So we actually conducted focus groups with 8th grade students, both at Julian and Brooks. We had 12 different sessions. Ashley Cannon, shout out to Ashley Cannon at Julian and to Michelle Stigger at Brooks, they're our facilitators. But the cool piece is that we also have a lot of pre-K and elementary teachers in our group, so they were the note catchers, so they got to kind of hear that progression from pre-K even to 8th grade and kind of think about, as we're talking to students, what worked and what didn't work on your journey to kind of figure out what dimension we really need to make sure that we're honing in on. So we did take all the notes and some themes emerged that have connections to all of our cross-functional work. So whether it be human resources, core instruction, thinking about transitions differently, we are all present in what the students heard and also present in responding in our call to action around what it is that is being asked of us. So what we heard is that students are really seeking a connection with their peers. So one of the things that really was a point of struggle in terms of 5th to 6th grade was really making sure that those same peer bonds connected. So friendships were broken, friendships were made, and how do we make sure that no matter what, there's some resilience in that and there's some protective factors in terms of making sure that those positive relationships continue. We also heard from students, they really have an interest in making sure that teachers of color are present in their classrooms and that our workforce reflects their identities and experiences. They were really interested in making sure that we continue our work in making transitions more seamless between grade levels and also from different space to space. And we have some exciting work coming up that I want to tease maybe later about pre-K to K transitions. And then obviously just making sure that that SEL support is there. So they found great value in what exists, but really want to make sure that that's there for them should they need it. And so based on what we heard, we prioritized the holistically well dimension. And so we really want to think about portrait-aligned experiences that speak to supporting students in this area. And then the second piece of the work this year was really making sure that we aligned the dimensions to standards. So we talk about standards and we want to make sure that we're clear on what that means for family and students. It's just simply what we want students to know and be able to do by the time they leave us. And that, in this case, could be at a certain subject or a certain grade, or for us, we're just aligning all of our dimensions to what we want students to know and be able to do amongst the dimensions. So when we're thinking about having a standards-aligned portrait, there are many standards categories. So we really focused on the Illinois learning standards. And so you'll see, and I'll go through an example in a minute, of how a constellation of standards actually show up in just one dimension. So we're just going to take a closer look at change agent. And just as a reminder, the JIST dimension calls for graduates to make a positive impact locally and globally through civic engagement and sustainability practices. And so when we think about aligning standards to that dimension, we started with our youngest learners. So these are just standard examples. So what we want them to do is to really get curious about their world by asking questions and probing and designing things. For students who have IEPs and require significantly modified curriculum, we want them to kind of think about what a topic might be that might be of interest and be able to include at least a fact or detail about that topic. For those engaged with our ISTE standards, our technology standards, we want to make sure that they're using digital tools in the right way to analyze and kind of figure out data as they're solving those problems and making decisions. The Illinois Social Emotional Learning Standards also play a part here. So as we're thinking about kind of all of us in sustainability and thinking about how to make sure that you're showing care for your neighbor, kind of planning and implementing a project that really seeks to improve the work of the community. Our science standards are also present clearly, so we really want to figure out how to help students make a claim about a problem, especially as it relates to environmental changes and the change that is necessary or that comes from kind of what we're doing as a global society. And then finally, our learning for justice standards also show up here in terms of working with friends and community to really kind of make a change and figure out how to achieve those goals. And then our second prong,
Yeah.
I'll hand that to you.
Yep, absolutely. And actually, I would just want to go back real quick, Ebony, to where you ended here. So just want to pause here for a moment and like what Ebony just went through. So basically, each of these dimensions are going to have, like Ebony said, a constellation of standards. That this is what it means at like kindergarten to be a change agent. And the standards or the learning targets would come from different places that are developmentally appropriate for a kindergartner, for example. And so what this does is it also then allows us to engage with families too around, oh, what might be some projects that we could do, or we just met actually with a couple of parents and myself and our principal, and so those learning for justice standards, thinking about how do we talk about learning justice, race in the home. There might be some places where these standards then give us a frame so that we can talk to each other. Schools can get organized around, like maybe we can focus on one of these standards. It gives us a framework to now start to engage in a meaningful way as a jumping off point. So, a community approach to youth development, this idea that we learn everywhere. Put this together. So Ebony and Amanda have worked with our community partners, and so what we're doing, and so Jan Arnold, for example, we've had conversations and met regularly as a team, Jan, myself, Ebony, and members of Jan's team to kind of talk about what this could look like. So what you're looking at the screen is different ways that you'll start to see the portrait show up maybe even in your Park District of Oak Park catalog. So it's like, it becomes a conversation point to be like, maybe we should do something in being financially savvy. Let's see what's in this catalog that has that icon by it, right? So now, again, just having a little bit more structure to shape our decisions and to have those conversations as a family about how we use our time outside of school. Because we know that if we're going to kind of level the playing field for everyone, it's about making sure we're thinking about what all of that out of school time looks like and providing access to rich learning for everyone. So we've also got some big ideas to try out in the future.
So we're excited about obviously the work that's happened, but also kind of looking forward. So what we're actually going back 1 second, to the summer, we spent a lot of time kind of visioning what could be the next step in terms of portrait implementation. So there's some call outs here for kind of project-based learning, some digital tools that we might use, and also obviously we talked about our community partnerships, but we also want to hone in on this idea of kind of our students leading us. And I think that was kind of undergirded by the fact that we had those focus groups with our 8th graders this year. And so we're thinking about and trying to incubate around a youth advisory council that would really kind of think about the next steps for the portrait. And we know that there are a lot of these conversations happening in the community, so we want to partner instead of isolate. So we're thinking about what a cross-agency approach might be to really kind of thinking about centering our youth in really not just the end product, but from the beginning, kind of learning and teaching into the portrait, but also getting their ideas for how to make sure that it's implemented well in the community, and then also kind of reflecting on what has happened and helping us kind of shape our implementation for future generations. And there we are. Any questions?
On the whole line. I know we've talked about this before, but I was thinking about this recently, and I know we all really miss Katie Conklin. Which
Ushma has no idea who you're talking about.
Is that, did you say hello, Kitty?
No, Katie Conklin, she used to come and harangue the district about
A tax watchdog.
Oh,
But one of the things, I've had some, not since she's left, but I've had a lot of conversations with her previously, and one of the things that she talked about was that she did like tutoring at one of the Catholic schools on the west side. And she brought up, like, why don't we bring in people who are senior in the communities into the schools? Because they also pay taxes, and they feel like those folks can feel very disconnected from where their tax monies go. I know this is more about what happens outside of school time, but I'm also wondering if there's a parallel conversation about bringing some of those folks into schools, so that there's kind of a bridge going both ways. I mean, the tutoring is one example, but there could be lots of other things.
Yeah, I think when we actually, last year when we were kind of doing that affinity work and we talked to seniors, there's definitely an interest. So I think it's just maybe bringing that back to the team to think through how that could actually live. So that's great.
I think that, yeah, and I'm just, what Ebony said, just to be clear, like when she says, when we talk to the seniors, we actually had an affinity session at the township during the senior lunch. And we kind of came in and we had our draft portrait, and we did engage with the seniors around exactly that question. And like Ebony said, that's also part of, you know, some of the feedback that got us to then the version that went out to everyone. And we've also, I went to an event, I actually crashed a chamber construction event that happened at the new American Place, you know, senior home, yeah.
The most luxurious senior home.
Yes, the most luxurious senior home. And I got a chance to meet with people there, so they're also eager to connect with the schools. And so what this does, in addition to kind of just like also just generally connecting and creating value going both ways, is it gives us, like I said, a framework for connecting. So even asking the senior, like, of these, what career did you do and how does it connect to this? And then that can become like, oh, we have a group of students that's interested in this dimension or the careers associated with that dimension. And that can help us to be a language versus like, when you don't have that kind of framework, it's like, oh, do you want to go to a senior center? Or like, for what or why? It gives us a focus and a purpose.
I have a question. Ebony, you mentioned just the sort of proliferation of standards early on, and then looking at the slide that has the standard examples, the enumeration of them makes me think that there's a lot of them. Like if you have to go to 11AECA, it suggests there's like tons. How do you sort of drill down to the ones that you think are most important for our students?
So that's a great question, because this summer we were tasked with taking all the standards that might apply to a dimension, and the spreadsheet was a bit overwhelming. So now we're doing the work of culling the big ideas so that it's easily digestible for families and for students. So and with no more than 3 standard ideas per dimension, but then also coupling that with projects or project ideas, so they can actually make those standards actionable. So whether you go to Trader Joe's or whether you go to the library, it's like, so you're able to really kind of actualize those.
I love the idea that there are those icons for the Park District Catalog, which is a very popular publication for most families this time of year, especially if you're trying to do summer planning. I like the collaboration. And also, I don't know exactly what the collaboration looks like for the library, but that would be the other big piece to collaborate with. And Park Education Fund, so you guys have covered your bases, so I appreciate it.
And Ebony has regular meetings with after-school partners at the middle school level, and I know we had, was it Yamba last year that did, like when Yamba did their summer program, they also kind of said, hey, portrait of an Oak Park 8th grade graduate, this is some of the spaces or dimensions that you can learn in this program. So across our public agencies, across our foundations, across our nonprofits, it can become like a community language. And so we're really excited about this feeling that we're raising our kids together, because that is actually what's needed to achieve the big vision. that we have in the equity policy. And until, again, and there's an eagerness on the part of our partners to be part of something big like that. And, until we actually start to stretch and think differently, it's really just not gonna happen. So we're excited because it is happening.
Other questions, comments?
So Ebony and Amanda are doing a great job, so I want to just recognize and thank them for
Thank you.
their
Thank you.
leadership and the whole team and everyone that's involved. Thank you.
All right, that takes us to the consent agenda. Can someone read the motion, please?
Move that the Board of Education of Oversight Elementary School District 97 moves to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Ross Driven is absent. Carney,
Yes.
Burns,
Yes.
Spurlock is absent. Kim,
Yes.
Kurt Johnson,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
motion carries.
All right. Action item 9.1, Lakeview Sunrise Transportation Contract. I know we discussed this last time. Anything you want to flag about it or any questions folks have?
I move that the Board of, I need to make a motion, but I move that
Go
the
for
Board
it.
of Education, Oak Park Elementary School District 97, approve a 5-year contract with Lakeview/Sunrise Bus Lines, Inc. for regular in-district and out-of-district transportation services for 2025 to 2026 through 2029, 2030.
Second.
Ross Driven is absent. Burns,
Yes.
Spurlock is absent. Moore,
Yes.
Kim,
Yes.
Carney,
Yes.
Kurt Johnson,
Yes.
motion passed.
Can I ask a quick
Yeah.
bus-related question? It doesn't have to do with the contract specifically, but I was looking at social media and someone brought up issues of ice on school buses. I guess that's happened somewhere. And because that's not under.
Not frozen water, but immigration and customs enforcement, I assume you mean? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Okay. Like they've just gone on to school buses?
Yeah, I didn't read the whole thing, but people were asking about their kids' district policies. And this is like adjacent, because my university has its own police force on campus, it's not campus security. And I've asked this question too about, because they're the actual police department, if we have jurisdiction over them, if they have to follow our policy versus like local. And we do, and so I'm kind of curious, I don't see it happening.
Yeah.
But if that were ever to happen, if there was any sort of understanding.
I'm not prepared to answer it right now,
Yeah,
but
I
we can
didn't,
get
I
back,
figured
but,
you would.
yeah, but we should
Right.
look into that.
Something that I,
It seems like there's a parallel to the sort of work we've been doing with individual schools that may be worth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea.
Okay. Title I Innovative Programming Contract Proposal. Any questions about this one?
Sheree, I just wanted to say last time you had asked to see all of the proposals that we had received, so I had shared that with the board last week.
Okay, I move that the Board of Education of Oak Park Elementary School District 97 move to approve new contracts exceeding $25,000 in the amount of $45,000 for Yumba and in the amount of $45,400 for Friday Night Place as presented.
I'll second.
Moore,
I'm abstaining.
you can,
I'm abstaining.
Kurt Johnson,
Yes.
Kim,
Yes.
Spurlock is absent. Burns,
Yes.
Carney,
Yes.
Ross Driven is absent. Motion passed.
Okay. Item 9.3, District 97 and Oak Park Police Department Rapid Entry Memorandum of Understanding.
Yes, so this is an item that we are bringing forward for discussion and action in one meeting. So if you would like, we have General Counsel Luis Rodriguez, as well as Chief Safety Officer Dr. Felicia Starks here to answer any questions that the board might have on this item.
Luis, I know in a past conversation, you had mentioned that there's sort of a legal requirement framework around that. Could you just sort of give us the basics of that?
No problem. So in the statutory reference that's included there in paragraph 1, the acknowledgement, there's basically a requirement in the school code. And it went into effect last year, so we're now on the back end of finalizing that piece that requires school districts and local, just local law enforcement to have an agreement that in the event of an emergency, so that would be something that where someone could be injured immediately or a cause of death, the police have an opportunity to enter to respond to that. So think active shooting and active people in the premises over the weekend or whatnot, and someone makes a call and the building has to go in either like lockdown or secure and they can't answer the door. This would allow them an opportunity to come in and respond to that emergency. So that's the statutory framework. It applies to all schools. I know Dr. Starks has been working even prior to my return with OPPD on starting the practice of what that would look like. So we're now on the back end. This MOU's already gone before the village, and the last remaining piece is for it to go before this board.
I had a question about who or what is the catalyst? Is it, I guess, who determines when it's an emergency or when they get called in? Is it's just case by case, or for the example, obviously if the district calls, we know
Right.
they're being invited, or if they, hear there's an active shooter. But I guess if someone calls and says I'm gonna bomb the school, I guess do they?
Or if they get a call from a student, is there communication between the police department and the administration? Do you know what I'm saying?
Right,
Because they all got phones now,
Right. So part of the implementation piece is the ongoing communication with the PD as it relates to this. So the short answer is the idea is that that communication not only continues, but it maintains. It's actually been happening based off my conversations with Dr. Starks and the PD, but we'll make sure that all of those details and considerations get built in. Also, if there's a need to revisit this as the landscape changes, we absolutely can.
Some of it's going to be a little bit of a judgment call with the policeman. If they get a phone call and they feel that reasonably that situation is going on, they need to enter the school, and they would do that. So that's why they have this, so that they don't have to call and check that they can be there. So I would, my ongoing conversations with the deputy chiefs, that they would, sometimes it's going to be a judgment call that they need to enter the building on their own without the assistance of anyone.
Yeah, and again, just keeping in mind this MOU is as nearly tailored as possible.
And also they have to, we would know when they enter the building, and also they have to share that information with us if they enter the building. That's all built into the processes we have in place. So it would be recorded.
And that would be an instance where we weren't making that call. So for example, someone saw something happening and there's no one in the building externally. I'm pretty sure the vast majority would be us calling in response to an emergency.
I just can't hear back here at all.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Let's
The
speak
last
up.
thing I said was the vast majority of the time would be the district calling in response, so because an emergency is occurring.
I think, that makes sense. Obviously, if it's an emergency, truly, you can't have extensive protocols, like somebody's having a heart attack in the building and you have to make 3 phone calls before you go in or whatever. I guess the other piece of it that maybe gets at what may be implicit in some of the questions is just making sure that there's opportunities over time to debrief situations that may feel less, you can come up with examples that feel obvious, right? And then maybe examples that feel less obvious, and maybe some of that just has to happen through practice, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, and myself, I'm the director of campus safety at the high school, meet every Monday with one of the deputy chiefs of police, and we talk about situations that maybe happen in the community or in our school. So an official debrief, yes, but that would also be a place where it would just be one of us and the deputy chief also revisiting a situation.
Just gonna say something.
Speak on now, sorry.
Other questions, comments? Somebody want to read the motion?
I move that the Board of Education of Oak Park Elementary School District 97 approve the memorandum of understanding between District 97 and the Oak Park Police Department on rapid entry as presented.
Second.
Harvey,
Yes.
Kim,
Yes.
Thank you.
Noah,
Yes.
Thanks,
Spurlock is absent. Burns.
Yes.
Ross Driven is absent. Kurt Johnson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, discussion item 10.1, school year 26 draft school calendar.
Yep, so Dr. Campbell Tominov is coming up, our Assistant Superintendent of HR and Equity. She has been leading the school calendar process with the team.
Everybody.
Welcome.
All right, so we do have a draft calendar for 25-26. And we've had a committee this year that's kind of been talking about the rules, regulations around what's in the school code, what do we need to be observing for holidays, what are some of the parameters we want to be considerate of. And so these are all the people that sit on that committee. And so I know there's been some questions around timelines and things like that. Although it is out of the norm, this is actually, we are not actually that far behind. So District 200 adopted their calendar late November, December, and then District 90 just adopted their calendar in January. So we're actually not that far behind. So wanted to make sure that we know that. So last month we actually sent out some dates and said these are some tentative pieces based upon some information that was already released. And we met as recently as today to talk about some next steps. So with that in mind, we are looking to start school on Monday, August 18th with Institute Days, and then have a second one on August 19th. That would have students' first day of attendance on August 20th. And again, normal school holidays, things like that. You'll see October 23rd and 24th there are highlighted. One of the conversations that we had was around the placement of our family teacher conferences and why we have them when we have them. And so one of the things that we want to consider is, do we have them at the right time? And so right now they're placed about 3 weeks, about 3.5 weeks before the end of the first trimester. Is that enough time for students to actually make change to impact any grades or their progress as for the end of that first trimester? And so the team asked me to gather some feedback in regard to assessments that are being done, how it might impact our scheduling if we move that up a little bit to maybe like the second week of October. And so that would be like the week of October the 9th. And so then if we had meetings that week, then it would be, could we make more of an impact? Would we be able to inform parents, families, and then students would be able to maybe make some adjustments, and then that would have more of an impact on grades and things like that. Because the end of the first trimester, we're looking at having that be November 17th at this point in time. So those are the kinds of conversations that we're having right now. So that's what we're looking at. Second trimester, one of the things that we also are looking forward to this year is January 5th is one of the first times that we are actually looking to have a Teacher Institute Day on the same time that we can actually collaborate with District 200. So District 200 has a professional development day on that day. So we've already reached out to District 200 and said, you have a staff development day, we have a Teacher Institute Day, is there a possibility for us to collaborate? And they said yes. And so we're looking to be able to find ways to share some learning on that day. Additionally, on March 17th, same thing. So we were able to align 2 of our 4 Institute days, professional development days with 200. And so we're really looking forward to that partnership next year.
And just to make sure that there are 2 days that are potential for collaboration. It's not that we've committed to both of them
Yes,
or whatever.
or all day,
Yeah,
but it's just an
Yes,
opportunity
it's
for
an
some
opportunity.
shared
Yep,
learning.
Yeah, so there's an interest in exploring that.
Yes. And so otherwise, these are tentative, these are the things that we were discussing. Like I said, we met as late as today at 4 o'clock to kind of talk through kind of where these things are landing based upon holidays, based upon the length of time of our trimesters. How is this looking and feeling for our team as we're building out the school year? And so with that in mind, we were close to that tentative end last week of May, but right now, without any emergency days, we're landing last day of student attendance approximately June 2nd.
Is there a reason the spring break is only 4 days?
That's Good Friday.
Because Friday is April 3rd,
Okay.
which is technically now a school holiday.
Okay.
So again, here, lots of different people thinking through this together and, having eyes on it before it comes to you.
Yes.
Does this, may have said this, so I apologize. Does this align with the like winter break or summer break? Winter and spring break, does this align with D200? And then do you know by chance if this, maybe how closely it might align with CPS as well?
That I did not check. I checked with District 90. I did not check with CPS.
Would you like us to look at that, or is there a particular question that you had about
No,
alignment?
just wondering, I'm thinking like, just parents and teachers that may have kiddos and.
Generally, we are earlier, at least a week earlier than CPS, because they generally go back, now that they start before Labor Day, then we generally are a week before that. So they generally are like that last week of August.
Yeah, I know last year we were on the same schedule, and which was pretty nice, but I was just wondering.
Yeah.
I think last year was because of the Democratic National Convention, they had shifted their start.
But in general, I don't think that we would be too far off just because of where the holidays fall in winter break. But I can definitely check and bring that when we bring it back at the next meeting and have that answer for you. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Natasha?
Discussion item 10.2, E-rate.
So we have Michael Ahrensdorf, our Chief Technology Officer, coming up. So this is a annual process, and you have a memo there that explains, and Michael's here to answer any questions that you might have.
Good evening.
Hi, welcome.
I'll go through this really quick. This one for E-rate, typically last year, if you remember, we had a pretty big overhaul with our wireless, so switching access points, little wiring, didn't have to do anything other than small places here and there. For that, this year, we are looking at just a renewal. So I'll go through a couple. So like, when we think about this, the big idea is as we support this. So we long range map of not only the work with the village, that's a huge infrastructure piece that we still have in place, that we're leasing fiber, and all the stuff connects through us being able to provide that service to all the buildings and how we think about this. So for what I'm bringing today, and you saw in the memo, is a renewal of one of our connections. So as part of that, kind of seeking out what are other things that the state's offering, and DOIT has a state offering through the consortium, and we have connections with them. We don't have to, we're not paying anything for some of our internet connection. We also use that to look at our student connection versus our staff connection. So what we're coming here and what's due for renewal would be our staff internet connection. What we look at is before taxes, $1,799, $1,799, and then after our reimbursement, because we're at the 40%, we'd be looking at just over $1,000 per month. All right. And this is part of the process to be able to go through for E-rate. We got to go through that process and have it voted on and all of that, knowing that this cost is not over the threshold, but something to bring and inform.
Questions? Thank you. All right, wow. We're up to concluding items, board remarks.
I have an idea.
Or my email.
Well, yeah, no, check your email, respond. But so I wasn't here at the last board meeting, and I was catching up, and apologies for the email, because I realized I was redundant to some of the concluding remarks. One of the things I was thinking about is whether we need like a fact checker in some of our, I know, don't give me that look.
I didn't give
There were, maybe that's just records. There were a couple things that were said during the remarks that were not accurate, well, actually throughout the meeting that were not accurate, and I get concerned that there are things said that get taken up in the community as if they're a fact. So like one example is that someone talked about like, colleges booming and busting, whatever, it's growing, and it's actually the opposite. Like this year will be the biggest freshman class ever, and from there it's like a cliff. I mean, the higher ed is literally calling it the enrollment cliff. Everybody's been in a panic for the last 5 years about this. And so like I don't want folks in the community to think like, oh, college is going to become more competitive, the numbers are growing, because that's actually not accurate. And so there's like that. I still would love to see a presentation at some point if this whole calculus thing even is a thing. And I say that as someone who dropped Calc 130 the day after the first exam in college. But I just think about like I didn't make it to calculus in high school. I don't really know how much of that is an expectation. It seems like that's like, I mean, I feel like we
How do you
shouldn't
feel
be.
about where you've ended up in life, though?
Well, I always question people who are like, and I turned out just fine, because I'm always like, did you turn out fine?
Are you
I
asking
mean,
yourself
I'm
that
here.
question?
I mean, did I make the
I'm
right
kidding.
choices? Who knows?
Ignore, please ignore.
So I don't know, like if that's kind of neither here nor there, but I was just thinking about it in terms of like, with like articles, a lot of times, whether they're online or elsewhere, like they'll have like corrections they'll make. I've just wondered about that, just because like I said, people, I mean, especially right now, everything gets taken out of context.
Yeah.
And so I just, again, think about if we're correcting inaccuracies. And like, I know I'm not saying anyone has like some agenda they're trying to put out there, but like if we do provide accuracies, I mean, just because like even we talked about with public comment, if there's something factually inaccurate that we can correct in that moment. Generally, we don't respond to public comment, but like that's something we do. And so I'm not trying to give somebody else another job, but I'm just throwing out there if we want to consider how we could do something around that, or if that's, I don't know.
Yeah.
Eric always tells me I'm making solutions for problems that don't exist.
With board
How do we know if
highlights,
it's
right?
infactual?
I don't know.
How do we know if it's not factual?
How do we know that it's actually like people are walking away saying, I can't believe that? Like, no one has, not saying that I'm end all be all, but I haven't heard or seen any chatter about it.
I will say, like, I think a general fact-checking role seems difficult to me. Like, I just think about the amount of time that can go into even just asking the volume of questions that comes out already. But one of the things that occurred to me in thinking about this a little bit is that if there are certain, like, premises that are sort of shaping our discussions around a topic, so I think the calculus is an example of where our math discussions that has been a central theme in our math discussions, and I think we do have this vehicle as a board for saying, hey, like, can we get a short analysis on like the degree to which calculus is essential for students going to, like just to kind of give us a common foundation of understanding that would make our discussions more fruitful. And I could see that also being something that gets sort of publicly.
Yeah. Well, just because I had a conversation recently with someone whose child just graduated with an engineering degree, and she was saying like he had to retake calculus in college because a lot of them are like, you didn't learn anything in high school, you're gonna take it again. And so and I have heard that before. I mean, not super recently because I'm not in that world yet, but I have heard of some colleges like.
So there's nuance to it.
Right, and so I guess I don't know if it's so much as a reminder for us to kind of be aware of making assumptions of what we think, or I don't know, like, I guess I want us to kind of sometimes, I feel like we get a little like sidetracked and we start building on premises that we don't know are factual. And so if there's a way for us to like pull that back. So even like with the ICE bus thing, like I saw it and I was like curious, but I don't want to go out in the community and be like, ICE is coming on the school buses,
No,
right?
let's not do that.
Right, and so I guess, and so when I brought it up, I
Yeah.
put this caveat out there, so I don't know if it's so much, maybe it's our self-responsibility.
It's a
But-
topic of discussion with high school parents. Also for us, I remember the discussion being introduced to us.
What are you talking about? Calculus?
Calculus.
Oh, sorry. So sorry, I was making, because we're talking about the bus, and I was like, I don't know what's going on.
Back to calculus. I remember specifically that concept of calculus in high school being brought up by our middle school teachers. I think now I don't remember if it was the first or second iteration of them changing the math curriculum. Remember that? So that's where I was introduced to it. So then my ears were perked up. And I'm not saying I know a whole lot either, or, that I have a full pulse on the community, but it definitely, and in the community council meetings, it has come up about this calculus thing. And it's interesting that the schools like, you have to take it again. I don't know if it's a tool to weed students out now. I don't know what it is. I just know it is become important to our community, our parents, and so we're sort of reacting to that.
And I think you're kind of making the point, which is to have a more nuanced understanding
Yeah.
of why and to what degree it's.
So I like literally thought about emailing my grad admissions office and be like, hey, do you guys look at calculus?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like, and that's just obviously one university, but
Yeah.
it seems like we should have a better understanding, because again, like, I was thinking about my friends whose kids are going off to like, do like be an English major like I was or whatever. And it's like, do they really want you to have calculus? Like it doesn't jive with me. And so I would love to have a deep, like a research-based understanding of where some of this is.
Yeah.
And then I also think like we have to be careful sometimes, like I know when I was teaching, like that there's this assumption like if you don't go to college, you're a failure. And I was thinking about this one kid who came to me and he was like, Miss Kim, he's like, I don't want to go to college. I don't like school. He's like, I looked up what the sanitation workers make in Chicago. He's like, I want to be a sanitation worker. And he like knew what trade school he had to go to and all these things.
Yeah.
And he was smart, but I appreciated that he wasn't going to shell out money to go do something that he didn't really want to do. And so I think there, kind of to your point, there's some nuance in terms of what we're saying, like kids can and should have access to, but that also shouldn't be, I think especially in a community that's so like driven like Oak Park, that shouldn't be like the only measure for kids.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Well, I think at least naming it, we can try to be more mindful of it going forward. I did have one board remark, which was a shout out, going back to the old school board remarks. This weekend was the West 40 Speech and Drama Festival, and the combined Brooks and Julian team took first place, which was awesome. And it was some amazing performances, and it was just really cool to see junior high kids like getting up and doing something that was kind of brave and challenging. And so.
Did you have a kid in that?
I do, as a matter of fact, yeah.
I was like, what's this what you do on your weekend?
I just go to West 40, East 20. I'm at them all.
Make your rounds.
That could be no, but I do have a kid.
Nice, good job.
Thank you. Any other board remarks? Board assignments, FAC has not met since the last, I think PTAC, we got a report out from last time. FORC, I think, has one coming up. IGOV, you gave us.
Oh, I'm we met Saturday, and we are working on this, so you want to run for an office and all of the information about that to make it available to the community. More to come.
PTOC,
Had a really robust conversation. So they asked about the school calendar, so we presented that. We talked about the ethnic festival. It's going to return, but it's going to be different than if you've ever experienced an ethnic festival in the past. It's going to be different. It's going to be really led by the library this year, and so we're going to partner with them, but not lead it. And so there's information on that. There was a discussion about who's leading it and what expertise they have. Amanda did a really good job. Amanda and Louise and Laie did a really good job of building those questions, all of those questions. And then there was an ask for a more intentional and more thorough communications regarding policies coming from the new administration. And so people wanted to see stronger language. I guess there was a miscommunication regarding what guidance has been provided to teachers. And so Luis did a really good job of saying, like, we provide this to building principals, but I guess some staff and parents may have felt like it didn't trickle down. And so I guess we also got a public comment about that today as well.
thank you. Sustainability, one update there is just on the solar front. Community solar is going forward. I think we've got a couple of potential hiccups with rooftop solar, one being that the new administration has created some funding questions, the new federal administration, and then that may create some delays that also then affect the calculus around sort of roof age and how long we can get, the degree to which investing in solar makes sense given when roof replacement will need to happen. So that piece is a little up in the air right now, as is a lot of things at the federal level, just because we've got lots of broad pronouncements and holds, but not a lot of clarity around stuff. And then, I don't know, Ushma, I know there was the case, there was one meeting around energy stuff at least, and maybe other things. I don't know if there's anything you want to update on there.
I think, we've got the D97 Sustainability Task Force members are serving on the case different work groups. And so those work groups are meeting at different times. And we're going to have our next D97 Sustainability Task Force meeting at the beginning of March. And so at that time, we'll ask people to report out on any work group things. And then we'll have in April the full case group coming together with members, from all the different agency groups. And so then we'll have a broader update at that time.
OPEF,
We got Nancy and Holly.
okay. CEC,
No, I'm not.
EdRed,
Let's see. So in the February meeting, which was last week, they talked a lot, Robin Schwartz actually came to talk a lot about the executive orders and responses to. And so the big ones they focused on were immigration, highlighting specifically for schools, how they rescinded schools as protected areas, and how that doesn't allow schools to be protected areas anymore. The attack on federal DEI programs and gender identity. They were talking about this idea of indoctrination with kids who are looking to transition in school but may not be doing that at home, and teachers being held accountable for that, and this idea that they're indoctrinating kids. A lot of discussion about protecting women's sports. And then the piece that's probably most relevant for us is they were talking about relevant strategies to help schools address or resist some of this. And one of the big things they recommended was really to kind of be careful about iterating policy on some of these as a knee-jerk reaction. One, because they were saying sometimes that can actually be more of a flashlight or I don't know, what?
performative.
Well, not only that it's performative, but actually because then you're putting it into writing in public, it may actually attract more attention and put you up for attack. Which is not to say that you shouldn't do it, but just be careful of what is more important in terms of whether you're trying to protect kids or not. And then the other piece that they were saying for districts that were planning on giving into the executive order, I shouldn't say giving in, but we're gonna follow the executive orders, to be careful of that, because that in some cases would be in direct contradiction to state laws. And so I think as a more progressive community, we are fortunate that we are in a more progressive state. So we do have that reinforcement of a lot of what we're espousing is in line with a lot of what PTAC and kind of the state government is. But we'll see. And I think particularly we've seen like Illinois in general might be targeted. So yeah, not the most uplifting of meetings.
Did they, I know with a number of the executive orders, they're like so high level that it's a little difficult to figure out, I mean, one, whether they're gonna get challenged, many of them are getting challenged already, but two, like more concretely, like what it could mean. Do they talk about sort of providing updated guidance as these things start to take more shape?
No, I mean, it was interesting because they did start the discussion with the definition of what an executive order was and how it's different from like an emergency order. And one of the things they did highlight is that even though it's a directive that has to be legally followed, it's not creating law or policy. And so I don't know if that's where some of the tensions will come up or challenges. So like, kind of like what Robert Schwartz said, like some of the things that are coming down are in direct contradiction to what Illinois' laws and rules might be. So I'm not really, they haven't really said, I think there's just so much coming out that it's hard to get a sense of how things are going to be executed and how things are going to be held accountable.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say on a personal level, I'm most concerned about kind of the freak outs people are doing and trying to like respond. And I've seen some conversations about kind of like the shock and awe, like there's just so much coming that it's a little bit of like smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, and that's part of the intent, right? Yeah. Okay. OPEF River Forest Community Council?
Meeting on Thursday.
Excellent. Okay, so that takes us to the draft agenda for next meeting.
Yep, so in addition to the proposed and preview items here, we've got 2 school improvement plan presentations coming forward. We'll have action on the school calendar. We also expect to bring forward that national equity project contract that we discussed last board meeting. And then as far as discussion items for future action, we have the board policy, the threshold discussion in terms of donations, and then also Cast and Bravo summer programming.
Really quickly, was the math curriculum presentation last meeting, was that just like an FYI, or is there a vote coming with that?
That was just forecasting the work that's happening.
Anything folks think is missing, needs to be added, might need to be added?
When is the agenda setting meeting, the next agenda setting meeting?
The what?
The next agenda setting meeting?
I don't know.
It is, so our next board meeting is on the 25th, it's the 20th.
The 20th.
So I'm happy to send like a reminder, because I can't think of anything top of head, but top of mind, but I think having a reminder.
Yeah, I should get in the habit of flagging that for you guys before it happens. And I will make a note to do that. But obviously if things occur to you between now and then, feel free to reach out. I've decided I need to get better about flagging some of the various things that are in our communications agreements about questions and whatever, so. Okay. I think that takes us to the end of our meeting. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
A second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It's a miracle.
Why didn't you send
that email a year ago?
But she's the main person